Hi all aspirants, welcome to my session. If you've seen my previous video on a planner for beginners, do continue watching this video, and if you haven't, click on the link above and then come back here later on. So I've mentioned in my previous session that is our idea is to have an overview of all the concepts. That is, we have to step back and see the whole picture, understand the story, understand the whole concept as in one line thread, and then get on to the details. And I've used some movie storytelling details examples as such to support my statement. So here in this session we are going to have an overview session from the 1905 of modern Indian history till 1947. So let's get on to that for now. So here in this session, our basic idea is to study all the factual points first and then get on to the conceptual ones. And what are the factual ones? All these important dates. Study all these dates first, and then it will be so much easier to have all the conceptual knowledge. It's sort of similar to studying all the periodic tables, and once you have the whole mastery of periodic table, it will be so much easier for you to have all equations and solving all the formulas and making all these chemical equations and etc. etc. So our first idea is to study all the important dates and all the important events, and then study what happened during those periods. And as we weave all these stories together, it will be so much easier to get on to the single events and then study everything elaborately. So 1905, the Bengal Partition, and as we all know, Bengal was a big province during those phases, and the reason why Britishers divided Bengal on the lines of communal rights was because of that is, Indian National Congress was founded in 1885 by A.O. Hume, and this party, which started off to be a namesake, started to gain lots of momentum and it started to influence the British government. So they founded this Indian National Congress and all these patriotic Bengalis as threat. So for those reasons, they partitioned the Bengalis on the basis of religious and communal lines. But for the reason that the Britishers said that Bengal as a province was very large and very huge for them to administer and govern. So they divided Bengalis as Western Bengal and East Bengal. West Bengal for the Hindu communities and East Bengal for the Muslim communities. And as part of the agitation, Swadeshi movement came into being, and as the name implies, Swadeshi means using of all the Indian goods and foregoing all the foreign goods and not using any foreign goods and services. So this gained momentum because as the agitation of the Bengal Partition and Swadeshi movement was taken over by Gopal Krishna Gokhale, and Bengal Partition came into being in October 16th of 1905. So one thing about history is that everything is connected. All the events is actually a dominoes effect of one single event, and that led on to the other, and that led on to the other, and so on. And as we all know, the Bengal Partition of 1905 did sow the seeds of communal divide and animosity between Hindus and Muslims. For those reasons, Muslim League came into being in 1906, and Muslim League was started by Aga Khan, Nawab Salimullah and Mohsin ul Mulk, and with Aga Khan being the president of Muslim League in 1906. And Muslim League was supported by the British government. Well, of course, this created further divide among the Hindus and Muslims. And the next important event that happened in 1906 is the Calcutta session of the Indian National Congress. Here what happened was that Indian National Congress is mainly dominated by two sessions or two categories of people, and one being the moderate people and the other being extremists. Moderate, as the name implies, they're very moderate. They don't want to create an agitation, they don't want to anger the British government. But the extremists, they were on the extreme side. That is, they wanted to have all these hard voiced protests and agitations against the British government, and for this reason the extremists put forward the Swadeshi movement, and they wanted to carry on to a large extent. That is, the Indian National Congress split it in two categories, that is the extremists and the moderates. The reason for the split was the moderates wanted Raj Bihari Ghosh as the president, but the extremists wanted Lala Lajpat Rai as the president. Also, the moderates wanted to call off the Swadeshi movement, but the extremists severely criticized the moderates, and they even blamed moderates for the partition of Bengal. For this reason, the Surat split, that is, the Indian National Congress divided into two sections, and the extremists resigned from the party. And the next important event was the Modelling reforms of 1909. And one thing about Modelling reform is that this reform was put forward by the British government, and in a way they actually fulfilled the demands of the Muslim League. Muslim League wanted two demands for them, that is separate electorate for the Muslims, and the other ones is special safeguard or special provisions for the Muslims. Indian National Congress was against such a provision because they didn't wanted to create a further divide among the Hindus and Muslims, but through this Modelling reforms, the Britishers fulfilled the demands of Muslim League, further dividing the Hindus and Muslims into two categories. And the next important big event was on 1916. That is, after the extremists resigned from the Indian National Congress, it was total inactiveness of the Indian National Congress. That is, Bala Gangadhar Tilak and other extremists were jailed and the other extremists were sent to exile. So it was total inactiveness till 1916. And in 1916, Bala Gangadhar Tilak along with Annie Besant, they started the Home Rule League and Home Rule movement, and this was a great movement initiated by them. The objective of this movement was mass mobilization to make people understand, to create awareness among the people of what is going on. And the next big event that happened in 1916 was the Lucknow Pact. That is, this Hindu and Muslim community was drifting apart from each other. So in this Lucknow Pact, Indian National Congress and Muslim League came into an agreement, and Indian National Congress agreed the two demands put forward by the Muslim League, that is, separate electorates for the Muslims and special safeguards for Muslims. And the next big event that happened in 1919 was Montagu-Chelmsford Reform and then the Rowlatt Act. So Rowlatt Act is an infamous act that imposed by the British government. That is, during the 1916, we all know that the Home Rule movement came into being, came into a force, and with Lucknow Pact, the Indians was becoming more stronger. That is, INC now had the support of Bal Gangadhar Tilak and all the other extremists and also of the Muslim League. So the Britishers feared that these Indians would overpower them. So for those reasons, Rowlatt Act came into being, and Rowlatt Act means that anyone could be jailed or imprisoned without any trial, without any jurisdiction, and no Indians were allowed to walk around with any arms or weapons. So since the Rowlatt Act came into being, two leaders from the Punjab provinces were arrested because of the Rowlatt Act. Two leaders of Punjab provinces were arrested, one from the Muslim community and the other from the Hindu community. So all these Punjab province people, they wanted to mobilize people and they wanted to make all these people understand that what these injustice being done by the British government. Because of Rowlatt Act, mass agitation wasn't allowed and it was considered to be illegal. So on the pretext of Baisakhi festival of 13th April 1919, people gathered here in Jallianwala Bagh. And what the problem was that General Dyer opened fire on all these people that was present on Jallianwala Bagh ground. And lots of people were killed, but according to the official report, only 379 people were killed. So in 1920, Gandhi came with non-cooperation movement, the first mass-scale movement initiated by Mahatma Gandhi. And this by and large was a successful incident except for the Chauri Chaura incident. And when Chauri Chaura incident took place, Gandhi had to withdraw the non-cooperation movement. And what non-cooperation movement essentially is, the same as the Swadeshi movement, that is boycotting all the foreign goods and using all the indigenous goods and services. So this was gaining lots of momentum and people started to take up this movement, and this was carried on to a large scale, and this was actually impacting the British government in a large scale. But because of the Chauri Chaura incident, that is, a group of Indians, they set fire on a police station in Chauri Chaura, and Gandhi had to call back the movement because of the violence done by the Indians. And also along with the non-cooperation movement, Khilafat movement gained support of Gandhi and the Indian National Congress. Before the calling off of non-cooperation movement, Khilafat movement was joined by Gandhi and Indian National Congress. Khilafat movement was initially started by the famous Ali brothers here in India, and Gandhi felt that we have to support the Khilafat movement in order to create a sense of unity among all these people. But since non-cooperation movement was called off, everything was left to crumble. And in 1923, Swaraj Party was formed by Motilal Nehru, Chittaranjan Das and MC Khelkar. This party was formed in a way that these party could pressurize the government, pressurize the British government to bring the modifications of these Morley Minto and the Montagu-Chelmsford reform. So in 1927, Simon Commission was set up and it came to India in 1928. And the problem with Simon Commission was that sure enough it was set up so that they could bring about all these changes or require changes in the Montagu-Chelmsford reform. But the main issue was that there were 7 members present in the Simon Commissions, and all of these 7 members were Britishers. Not even a single Indians were constituted in the commission, and this was severely agitated by all the Indians, and many slogans like Simon Go Back was used by almost all of the Indians, and people came out and they severely agitated and protested against the British government, and they were severely crumbled and crushed by the Lathi charges and police forces, and Lala Lajpat Rai succumbed to his injuries and died because of Lathi charges. So for this reason, Nehru report, that is Jawaharlal Nehru created a report in 1928 with Motilal Nehru as a chairperson. But the problem with Nehru report was that they wanted more of Swaraj and less of Purna Swaraj. That is, they didn't wanted the complete independence, but but they wanted more than the Swaraj, that is the dominion status. But this was severely criticized by Jinnah. He said that he wouldn't stand by the Indian National Congress unless they asked for the Purna Swaraj. So thus came the 14 points of Jinnah in 1929, and he even included different visions and different points for Muslims as well. And also the other important event that happened in 1929 was the Lahore session, and over here Nehru demanded for Purna Swaraj, that is quit India, and they decided that 26 January will be the Independence Day for India, and this is always celebrated every year from 1930 to 1940, and this is one of the reasons that we have 26 January as the Republic Day, and even a constitution was released on 26 January. And with all these new resolutions passed by the Indian National Congress and all these patriotic leaders, we had civil disobedience movement, all the salt satyagraha by Gandhi and the Indian National Congress, that is the famous Dandi March by the Gandhi. This created a mass scale agitations by whole over India. The reason was that salt was the commodity which is believed to be consumed by both the rich and the poor, and the British imposed severe taxes on salt, and they were even prohibited from creating salt. For this reason and for this agitation, Gandhi, along with lots of people and lots of patriotic people, they broke the salt law. And yes, of course, all these leaders were jailed and some people were injured, and all these problems happened, and Britishers, they called for a first round table conference in a way to stop all these agitations. The first table conference was here in London, and it was a failure. The reason was that Indian National Congress didn't participate, but sure enough the other political parties participated, but the Indian National Congress didn't participate, providing this conference to be a complete utter failure. And then in 1931, Britishers realized that they cannot have a conference, they cannot hold a committee without the Indian National Congress or the Gandhi. And for those reasons, Gandhi-Irwin Pact came into being. That is, Gandhi was asked to sign in the Gandhi-Irwin Pact in a way that he has to attend the second round table conference, and provided that all these political leaders will be released from jail except for Guru Singh and Bhagat Singh. These two were executed, and thus a second round table conference came into being. But yes, this was also a failure. The reason was that Britishers said that they would not provide any forms of economic or political assistance or support to Indians for the attainment of independence, and the other reason was the Britishers wanted separate communal electorates here in India. So the obvious reasons, Indian National Congress didn't accept all these demands, thus proving the second round table conference to be a failure. And then the third round table conference was here in the date 1932, and the reason was this as a failure was that, and again the Indian National Congress didn't participate. And in 1939 to 1945, the Second World War was happening, and in 1939 India participated in the Second World War without the consent of these Indian political leaders and political parties, and for this reasons the Indian ministers resigned. So this led to the Cripps mission in 1942. So by this time the Britishers were being very weak because of all these ongoing world wars and all these extra additional expenses and all these political weaknesses. So for those reasons, Cripps mission was initiated in 1942, and the Britishers wanted India's support against Japan, but the problem was that India didn't sign into it, they didn't consent into it. The reason was the Indians felt that, the Indian National Congress and Gandhi felt that once these Britishers will give them the independence, Japan wouldn't have any reasons to attack them, because the Indian political leaders and Japan had a cordial relationship. And the other reasons that the Britishers wanted India's support in the promise that India will attain independence after the end of World War II, and Indian people and Indian political leaders didn't believe all these Britishers because there are lots of uncertainty on the World War II and when this will get to an end. So for this reason, Quit India movement or Bharat Chodo movement was started in August 8th because of the failure of the Cripps mission, and the problem was that on the next day, on August 9th, all these political leaders including Gandhi, everyone was arrested. They was taken to an unknown destination and they were crushed to a large extent. But even then, this movement was taken over by the large scale people, and sense of nationalism and patriotism started to intensify in the minds of people, and large scale of women, children and people, peasants, everyone participated over here. Thousands of people were killed, but still they agitated and protested against the Britishers. And yes, after few years, that is in 1944, Gandhi was released on the reasons of health conditions and health grounds, and thus came into being the CR Plan of 1944. CR Plan or CR Formula or Rajaji Formula was actually a proposal formulated by Chakravarti Rajagopalachari to solve the political deadlock between the Muslim League and the Indian Indian National Congress on the independence of British India. This plan was put forward in a way that this will create lots of friendliness with the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League, but this didn't happen. So in 1945, the Shimla Plan or the Shimla Conference was held. That was Lord Wavell invited 21 political leaders, that was including Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, to Shimla. That is actually a summer capital of British India, to discuss and settle their differences on the basis of communal lines. Jinnah wanted that only League members could be Muslim representatives in the council and opposed to the Congress nominating Muslim members. And Jinnah wanted the League to be the sole representatives of the Muslims in India. And we all know that Indian National Congress would never allow to this. And yes, even this plan was an utter failure. And the next important plan was Cabinet Plan in 1946, put forward by Clement Attlee and then the Prime Minister of UK. What he wanted was that he wanted to transfer the power and resolve the constitutional deadlock between the Indian political leaders, that is Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. And according to the plan, dominion status will be given for the time being and India will attain independence in June 30th, 1948. But the problem was that India was to be demarcated on the basis of Group A, Group B and Group C. That is different provinces, big chunks of provinces will be divided on 3 categories, and the problem was that they will be having different constitutions, different bodies and structures for each 3 categories, and within these individual Group A, Group B and Group C, they will be having different constitutional and different constitutional system. One good point about cabinet mission or the cabinet plan was that Attlee promised that they wouldn't be a partition here in India, but only that we will be divided on the basis of 3 categories. And this posed series of complications here in India. And yes, the last plan, that was the Mountbatten Plan of 1947 here in India. We attained independence on 15th August 1947 and Pakistan attained independence on 14th August 1947. So this was my overview class from 1905 of modern history to 1947. So what I did here is that I gave you a whole picture, that is what happened over there in a one-line thread. I explained you in 10-15 minutes, and what you have to do is the next time that you revise, you have to get into the details, that is what happened during the Muslim League, what happened during the Swaraj Party and everything. When you study everything in those perspectives, it will be so much easier. That is, once you get the whole concept, once you get whole picture, it will be so much easier to get into the individual details. That is the same example that I said in the other video. Once you have the whole idea of the story of the whole concept, it will be so much easier to have small individual components. So that's it for today's video, and if you have any doubts or any queries regarding the same, do let me know that in the comments or just WhatsApp me in my WhatsApp number. So that's it for now. So goodbye for all.